Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's NoVA Ux Meetup. My name is Jim Lane, and for those who are not familiar with the group, NoVA Ux is a meetup for UX professionals in the Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. metro areas, although we have members joining us from all over the place in different months. Overseas and so on. We've been hosting monthly talks and workshops since the group was founded back in 2012, and I am delighted that you all could join us this evening. Before I introduce tonight's talk, take care of some of the usual housekeeping details. As our regular attendees know, we've been doing remote meetups now since 2020, while our presentations are going to continue to be virtual. We are talking with a few groups about organizing some in-person social events, and maybe doing one or two of those this fall. So stay tuned to the meetup group and our Twitter channel for updates about those events. Next month's talk is going to feature Ann Doherty, lead content strategist for Northwestern Mutual, who will be sharing strategies for applying UX methods that we already know and use every day to craft stories that will win over audiences no matter who that audience might be. Tonight's talk is going to be recorded. There will not be any slides. This might be a first for us. So no slides tonight, so no slides to share afterwards, but we will be recording and uploading to YouTube as normal. We've got the whole gates open tonight. If you'd like to turn your camera on, go for it. We'll ask everyone to mute once we get started, just so that there's no background noise. But if you have questions, you are welcome to ask those as we go. We will also do, if there are some leftover questions, we'll do some Q&A at the end as time permits. But feel free to interject with a question if you are so inclined. And so if you would prefer, you can ask questions in chat. I'll keep an eye on chat and we can do some questions at the end if anyone would prefer to wait and just type in their question. And if you are hiring and would like to share that information with the group, you can put that in chat as well so others can see it. Just put in some quick information about the position you're hiring and who you're and what you're looking for, so others can partake. And then lastly, if you would like to share your thoughts about tonight's event on social media, our Twitter accounts are on the slide in front of you. Dr. Buzit's is there. Mine is at NoVA Ux Meetups handle. So we'd love to, if you'd like to tweet or TikTok or whatever you'd like to do, feel free. So without further ado, tonight, and you know, I never even asked to pronounce your last name. Buzid?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous. Tonight we welcome Dr. Ahmed Buzid, founder and CEO of Witlingo. It's a McLean, Virginia-based startup that builds products and solutions that enable brands to engage with their clients and prospects using voice, audio, and conversational AI. Prior to Witlingo, Dr. Buzid was head of Alexa smart home product at Amazon and VP of product and innovation at angel.com. And we are delighted that you could join us here this evening.
Thank you so much, Jim. Well, first of all, congratulations on 10 years. That's quite an achievement.
Thank you.
I know it's not easy. Congratulations to you, to Alex, to Nita, for all the hard work you guys have been doing for a decade now officially. And also for pushing through you know, the last 2 and so years. So I mean, that's impressive that you guys have I have attended several of your live events, and they were always like packed, jam-packed, right? And I was always envious of how you were able to do that.
Well, we're looking forward to, you know, like I said, I hope we can pull together 1 or 2 get-togethers. They'll be very social, no speakers, no slides, just getting together. But it'll be great to see everyone.
Yeah, wonderful. As Jim said, I don't want to do slides, and I don't want to do them sort of like a stunt. You know, you can think of it as a stunt in the following sense. So I've just published this book with Dr. Wimar. Can you see it? And you probably can see it. Anyway, it's called The Elements of Voice for Style. And the book doesn't have any visuals, except at the very, very end in an appendix, you have 3 small visuals. And the purpose of doing it that way, meaning relying almost exclusively on words and language, is because the book is trying to help folks design for experiences where the only thing you have at your disposal is your language, is your voice, and the fact that you know how to speak and how to converse, right? So in a way, if you want to design a voice, let's call it a voice first conversation or a voice bot, you have to really master the subtleties of language, and you have to understand how much of a challenge it is to actually design a good, highly usable voice bot. So what is a voice bot? Voice bot obviously is let's call it a piece of software that enables you to speak with your own voice, speak naturally, and enables you to receive information through voice. I mean, the other the bot is speaking back to you. So the Amazon Echo would be an example of that. When you call into a bank and you talk to the automated system, that's IVR. It's another example of that. If somebody wants to be a designer when it comes to voice first experiences, one has to take language very seriously in terms of a craft, and not only on language, but also the fact that that language is being used in a conversational setting, a back and forth setting. So language and then dialogue in the case of you talking to a piece of software. Anyway, so within that spirit, I said I will have a conversation because we are conversation designers. And I have a conversation with you guys, and I would love to be interrupted, to be asked questions as I go. If something is not clear or something sparks thoughts in your head and you just want to do a little bit of a deep dive, I'm more than happy to engage. I always find a lot more value for myself, as well as for my audience when it's very interactive. So feel free to just turn this into a conversation. I have things to say and I'll say them as we go, but feel free to just say, hey, I have a thought about that. Okay, so let me provide sort of the core idea here. And the core idea is that of all the interfaces that we need to build, the VoiceBot interface is the one that pushes us to emulate, in this case, emulate the interaction between a human being and another human being, okay? So when we interact a website, we are free to be as creative as we want because we're not emulating anything really. I mean, there's graphics, there are constraints, and you can click, and there are certain things that we can do, you can use, and then we understand things in terms of how people react to color and so forth. So we have all those concepts, and we're free to create, to be creative, right? But in the world of VoiceBot, designing these VoiceBot, where I've dwelled for the last, 20 plus years, there's always this thing, this dogma, call it, this dogma of emulation, where it seems that the goal is to create a bot that sounds and acts like a human being. And I think that is very misguided on 2 grounds. First, you will never get to a point, or it will take a lot of effort to get to a point where you are having a conversation with a bot and you can't tell that it's a bot if you have a real conversation with that bot. Meaning, yeah, it can sound like maybe for 15 seconds you can be fooled, but at some point the voice bot will be tripped by some nuance, or you'll hear something that sounds weird, and all of a sudden you're in that situation where you don't know whether you're talking to, and then very quickly, especially when things go wrong, human beings know exactly what to do to recover from errors, but voice bots don't. And so this emulation of human beings is misguided. And I always like to give the example of, imagine if we try to solve the problem of computation, meaning getting a computer or software to do calculations the way a human being does, because we hold a human being to be the paragon, right? So we do research, we find out that people do calculations in this way, and we end up emulating exactly how a human being does it. That would be pretty stupid, right? Because we human beings are not good at figuring out what 1,372 times 47 is. We're just, it doesn't come naturally to us. But there's a way that we figured out, a binary way, right, where instantly we have the answer, right? So that's an example where we did not emulate. We went and we used Boolean logic, and we figured out a way to have ones and zeros be be reflected in circuits and so forth, and transistors, and then we build a calculator. I don't know, maybe like 75 years ago or something like that, right? So there is an example of where if we had followed the track of emulation, we would have wasted a lot of resources and time. It just feels to me that we're doing some of that when it comes to designing voice bots. But I think more crucially is we have been doing that for quite a bit of time in the context of artificial intelligence. So I've been in the artificial intelligence space for, I don't know, 25 years before it was a thing, right? Specifically, I was in natural language processing. And we were constantly trying to emulate human beings. How does a human being do it? Let's go to psychologists and understand how they do it. Let's try to emulate human beings. Let's create frames. Let's do all kinds of things. And with the guiding principle being emulation, as opposed to let's forget about how does a human being do it. Let's focus on how do we solve this problem. And there was a breakthrough, I would say, in AI, and that's why AI now is a big thing. There was a breakthrough when the era of big data arrived, meaning we had lots, gobs and gobs and gobs of data, and we were able to collect data cheaply, and hardware became very cheap, so we could do a lot of computations on big, massive data. And so that we decided that, hey, let's solve for example, the speech recognition problem, the dictation problem by just, with a hammer, right? Let's just go and feed lots and lots of data. And what happened is we basically solved, or we have now today, transcription software that is extremely performing, not only in terms of accuracy, but also in terms of speed, right? So if you talk to your Amazon Echo and you say, what's the weather in San Francisco, it will understand it immediately. It will get back an answer to you immediately. Boom, and you have and you have what you need. Is that the way human beings do it, with gobs and gobs of data? Clearly not, because, and this is the big debate going on right now between two camps. Let's call them the semanticists and then the connectionists, right? So the semanticists are the guys who say, we need to map and create ontologies and meaning the way human beings do it. And let me tell you how, they'll say, you see how a toddler or a human being within 3-4 years is able to talk and construct sentences and understand language far better than the most advanced of the AIs that we have today. And so they say clearly, obviously, we're doing it the wrong way. And look at all the resources we consume, and so on and so forth, right? And so the semanticists are the camp that sort of say we are going about it the wrong way. Now, the connectionists, on the other hand, they have a pretty good argument, and I'm very sympathetic to it, which is you guys had 40 years to solve this problem through ontologies and through semantics and through whatever, and you didn't move the needle. When the era of big data came, we were able to actually start delivering solutions, whether it's NLP or it's speech, or whether it's machine learning and so forth, through brute force, through, in essence, statistical models, which is collect lots and lots and lots and lots of images of dogs, and lots of images of a certain fruit, and lots of images of faces, right? And then have an algorithm that takes that and creates trainers, right? And you have trainers and you have testers, and the more data you give it, the more accurate it becomes. And boom, it's a black box. You enter a face, it tells you this is the person. You enter a fruit, it tells you this is the fruit. Okay, it works, right? And so as far as as far as that debate is concerned, I think it's sort of a non-debate because it's the usual debate between scientists and engineers. The scientists are trying to explain the world. They're trying to say, this is how things are. And the engineers are not about explaining anything. They're about how do we make things work? How do we deliver a solution? All right. And so, and I see more of the semanticists, meaning the scientists, the people, the philosophers, the folks who are saying this is not how the way it works, who are getting much more exercised about this issue than the other guys who are engineers and busy doing things, delivering stuff, right? And so forth, right? So, the idea of emulation, I believe, right? The idea of emulating a human being is something of is a thing that we need to be aware of as we engage in delivering solutions, especially ones that have to do with an interface that is human, right? So it's very understandable how we went that way. All right, we said, let's go ahead and emulate, because that's how human beings do, and we understand how human beings interact with human beings. And so within the context of voice user interface design, we make we propose that the best way to design is to look at the tools that you have. The tools that you have is sound, and you have time, meaning somebody speaks, and then after that, there's a period of time where the other person gets to speak and respond, and there's a basic mechanism. But don't do things like, for instance, start with, hi, how are you, right? I'm doing fine, how are you, right? Which is how human beings do it, because we don't treat human beings as objects, right? We have to acknowledge their humanity. And so a greeting serves that purpose, right? The basic purpose of, hi, how are you? I'm doing fine. So how can I help you, right? And then go back and forth, and so forth. In the case of say a voice bot, one of the principles that we give here is, your greeting should not sound like it's a human being. It should be something like, let's say it's a bot for CNN, right? It should be a sound that when somebody hears, they connect with the brand CNN, and then they know that it's CNN because it says, CNN, how can I help you? Boom, right? So I know it's there. Okay, the greeting is taken care of. It did its purpose, its functional purpose, which is to ensure that I know I'm in the right place and ask me what do I want, right? Now, so the next thing I want to point to is within the world of Voicebot, and we treat this in the book, is there are two dogmas, all right? So there's this first dogma of emulation, right? We were trying to emulate human being, as I was saying. And then the second dogma is the dogma of the voicebot needs to be designed in such a way that anyone who invokes it, no matter what, should be able to use it. Okay, now that sounds like a reasonable thing to have as a best practice. Anyone should come in and anyone should be able to use it, right? But it's a dogma, and it's a counterproductive dogma because it creates laziness in the process of designing and launching voice bots. And let me explain what that means. Now, if you put the full burden of designing a highly usable voice bot on the designer, right? Then what is the UX researcher doing, for example, right? Are they giving you the information about, these are the people who are coming in, these are the problems that they have. They have 3 problems. For example, they're calling a bank, right? Call a bank, you do your research, you found out that 80% of the people who call, they want to, I don't know, activate a card, or they want to find their balance, 80% of them. And then you have, another 10%, and then there's a trail, right? And the rest, they ask for certain things and so on. But you know that if you take care of those first 3 things, that the head of, and then forget about the tail, by definition, you will take care of, I don't know, 90% of the people will be completely happy, right? If you know that. Now, if you know that, then why would you go and say, here are the things that you can do. You can do A, and you can do B, and you can do C, and then you can do D, because I've heard menus that give you 6 options, right? And then they are ordered in such a way that most people actually want the 5th option. And I'm like, you didn't do your basic research, right? why, if you are going to use a menu, at least put the most important one at the top, right? So my point is that if you adopt the dogma of it's the designer who owns the bots, and they are the ones who are going to have to figure out how to make sure that no matter what request comes in, we can handle it, then you're setting yourself up for failure and for frustrating the user. A better way. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a comment.
Yeah, please. That's the whole point.
Something else that I've noticed is they never seem to get smarter. Like if every time I call the pharmacy and I always refill a prescription,
yes,
knows what number I'm calling from.
Yes.
Why doesn't like, hey, would you like to refill that prescription again?
Exactly.
It's interesting. Yeah.
That's a great point. That's exactly right. A human being would not be able to do it because a human being is not going to be able to say, oh, it's that guy, right? But a bot can. It's basically phone number. This guy always, 80% of his requests are about this. Probably is asking for that. Boom. Or for example, you could leverage. So that's an example of personalization per person, right? But you could also leverage the fact that on Sundays, let's say, 90% of the people call about store hours, okay? Because they don't know, because they know it's probably gonna open later and close early, right? And so maybe your voice bot can say, this is Sunday. I know most people, and you say, in fact, you might not even ask, are you asking about the hour? You might even say, hello, by the way, we're open from 10 to 5. And the most beautiful experience in the VoiceBot world is the experience where you got what you wanted and you didn't have to do anything. So you called before 10 seconds, it said, the hours are this or that. Can I help you? And you just hang up, right? And so that's a great example of where personalization, being able to leverage data that you have to adjust yourself, be smart as a bot, gets you to deliver a great experience. And that experience is not about you, the designer. It's about the research that was done, number one. And number two, the fact that it was maintained once it was launched, because these bots and the populations that engage with them are changing, are evolving. Maybe there are new things that they ask about, right? So if you just, design it, build it, launch it, and forget it, you're not leveraging the data, you're not leveraging the patterns, you're not doing much. So the point of saying that is a dogma of the designer is the one who owns the blame or who owns the praise for a great voice bot, sort of lessens and mitigates the pressures that should be there on the UX research, on the product manager, the owner of the product, in this case, the voice bot, on post-launch. So it's always a living product. It's not something that we launch to forget about it, right? It's a living product. Somebody has to own it, has to review it every week. And let me tell you that the vast majorities of these deployments, they basically don't do much other than a bit of symbolic, just to check a box UX research when it comes to the beginning. And then the designer says, well, let's have a menu, and let's make sure that the menu is phrased well, and let's make sure that we don't have more than 5 by 3, sort of the basic UX principles that one follows. And those guys, they do their job, right? But if you are doing a menu and you don't know which ones are the most important because you don't have the research, and you don't know maybe that on Sundays or Saturdays or in the afternoons, you have this kind of traffic, so you can shift the kind of things that you offer, or even the menu structure, then basically, again, you're setting yourself for mediocrity at best. And that's what we see out there. It's mediocre voice bots, right? And we see them, I believe, in this book, we take a step back and say, it's got to be something fundamentally wrong here, right? It's not just we have bad folks out there who don't know what they're doing. There's a rising generation of talented UX designers, but they are being set up for failure if the belief is they and only they are needed for delivering a great product. And I'm sure that everybody here agrees with me that to deliver a great product, you have to have a great product manager, right? Somebody who owns the product, and you have to have great UX research that's taken seriously, right? Again, I always complain about how UX research is not taken seriously. They do the research, they deliver the report, and then it's ignored. by the product manager, by the UX designer, and they just don't read it, or they read it cursorily, or they say, we know what we're doing. Let's get to the fun. And then design happens, and then it gets developed, built very well, and so forth. And then you launch it, and it's not doing what you wanted to do because you didn't do your basic UX research. Anyway, so that's the second dogma. The first one is emulation. Stay away from emulation. Don't try to solve the wrong problem, right? Focus on what are we trying to do. So for example, another example I give about how emulation is the wrong way to go about things is, for instance, if you're blind, right? If you're blind, having a human voice speak at the rate of a human being is very, very slow, right? It's extremely annoying for them to hear a human being talk because it's slow. And so you see them when they prefer text to speech because they can speed it up, right? They can speed up because it feels like the brain of somebody who's blind, that capacity that we're using for a visual has gone into the auditory, right? And you're able to process a lot faster. You don't need this slow pacing. So here's an example of where, for that specific use case, right? If the more it sounds like a human being, the more annoying it is. The less it sounds like a human being, the faster it is. As long as the robot or the bot is enunciating the words, it's better. And I've seen actually I've had conversations with developers who are blind, right? Who actually code, right? And they use text to speech to be able to know what's going on, right? In the code, and they love their text to speech. And there was the provider of the text to speech. I remember I was talking to this guy, provider of the text to speech he was using, upgraded the thing so it sounded more human. And so he had to go and call support and say, I want the older version. I don't want this version. This version is not as good as the other one. Because it was a little bit slower and so forth. And so these are real things, and these are just examples of where emulation clearly, and we have many data points. Emulation is not the way to go as a philosophy, as an approach, right? Don't make the bot sound like a human being, both in terms of the way it sounds as well as in terms of the dialogue that it engages with you. Another example we give is, when we're talking to each other, interruption is not a thing that you do without caution, right? You don't just barge in and start talking, right? But if you take that protocol that we use between human beings, between us when we're talking, if you take that protocol and say we are going to emulate it, right? What's going to happen? Is the bot going to complain about you interrupting it? Are you going to feel shy about interrupting it? No, you should just interrupt it. You should, if you want to raise your voice, raise your voice. If you're not feeling happy, you just want to bang at do it, right? It's a machine. And that machine is there for a purpose, which is to accomplish things for you. It's a tool. It's not a human being. And so it's hard to sort of strike that balance, because on the one hand, we don't want to emulate, but on the other hand, when somebody comes in, somebody who's using a bot, they do bring with them that baggage, because that's how they interact with human beings. They do bring with them the baggage of hello, and especially I see the older generations. I work with ARP, and we have a couple of projects with them, and so we have these bots deployed in homes on Echo and Google, and so those skills, you see the older folks engaging with them in a polite way, right? But then the interesting thing is, after a while, they figure it out and they don't have time to waste. And so they just jump in and interrupt or repeat 10 times. They don't feel like they're imposing. That's how it should be, right? It's about understand, internalize that it's about, and engage with it the way that you want to engage with it. But more crucially, when you're designing, don't design with these rules that we have internalized about human to human interaction. Don't lean too much on them to the point where you're replicating those kinds of interactions.
So it sounds like you're saying that we should, not go down the route of trying to give it any kind of personality. We should just get down to business.
Yeah, I mean that's is that Robert?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I am like, one of the things that I complain a lot about is how much effort is done to create personas, right? Personas in voice, right? Now, the fact is the following. People will always sort of perceive a certain character in your bots, right? And my point is, give your character, your bot, some kind of integrity in terms of it's coherent. It's the same voice, it's the same kind of style, right? So that there's no dissonance, so that the person who's interacting with it is not asking, well, why is it talking this way now versus that way, right? Create consistency, right? But don't try to do things like, I'm going to create a bot that sounds like a 45-year-old professional woman, right? And I see that all the time when they give her a name and they give her a social standing and so forth. So they try to lean too much on that. And so these are one of the controversial things out there is, I'm against persona as such, but I do realize and I do promote creating ensuring there's integrity in the character that you are designing. Did somebody want to say something?
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm Lisa. I'm just trying to get this straight. Of course, you can see my name at the bottom there.
Yes.
So this is my thought, and I have no experience in designing bots or anything like that, but my thinking on it is I'm very much intrigued with it, something that I want to kind of explore. I feel like it's like a layered, much like the process of user experience design, or going about anything when you're approaching something. Now, sorry, there's a dog. So the thing is that I was thinking a voice bot is only as good as the AI, and the AI is only as good as the content and the context. So with constructing the information architecture and whether it's the website, the app, whatever, you need to have like kind of along the lines of like object-oriented user experience. So it's, you have the nouns, but also, the verbs, the actions. So anything that's within the service or the website, whether it's information, whatever, my thinking is that you need to kind of pertain what questions evolve around that subject or that action, right? And you go from there. I had a heck of a time with a mobile phone carrier trying to figure out something about my account, or I was in the midst of trying to finalize my account. And anyway, it's very frustrating. And kind of what you're saying about AARP, they interrupt. But the thing is, most people interrupt bots because they don't trust. So I think the thing with the voice bots is that you need to establish trust. And the only way to provide that is proving its knowledge and its capability to provide whatever you're trying to get at. And I mean, emulation, yeah, that's, like you said, is also like a fine balance. You don't want the bot to sound like a human because that's kind of distrustworthy because people are smart. You're not human. Like
exactly.
At the same time, so I ramble and I kind of do a stream of conscious. And anyhow, but that's my thinking on a voice conversation design, all that is only as good as the artificial intelligence and connecting the dots. I'm going to turn off my mic because the phone's ringing. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, AI, whatever that means, right? AI in the sense of leveraging information that you have to do things in a smart way. So AI could be, what Jim was saying there, like, hey, this guy calls on every Friday, he asks about this thing. How do you surface that is what AI does for us, right? It surfaces patterns, it surfaces connections. It sees that maybe it sees things like if you ordered a product 2 days ago, probably calling by the product. And so that's what AI does for us. AI is a broad label. And I always try to sort of situate AI within an ecosystem of concerns and tools, right? AI is not the solution to everything. You could have as much AI as you want, But if that AI is being used in the wrong way, then okay, so it's powerful AI, but is it doing its job in terms of getting the user to do what they want to be doing, right? So you might, for example, be what is it, the expression, too clever by half, perhaps, right? Sometimes I see that happening all quite a bit, right? For example, trying to be nice and saying hello Ahmed, right? But they don't say Ahmed, they say Hamid or something like that. And so it blew up in their face to try to personalize that. But it's not important to say my name, is it, right? It could be, and I've seen smart designers where it's a lot more pardonable to mangle somebody's last name than somebody's first name, right? So because human beings do it all the time with mine. Jim didn't, he said it perfectly. But I would say 50% of the time is Bowsed and so forth. And so if the bot says that, I'll be fine with it. But Ahmed, or somebody who's called, whose name is spelled a little bit differently, and then the bot just mangles it. Okay. So that's an example of being a bit of trying to use too much when you don't need to, and have it backfire on you. In any case, go ahead. Somebody wants to say.
Here's a question for you. So, so I use Siri. My Siri is an Australian bloke, because it's just fun.
That's great.
So Apple's obviously spent an incredible amount of money and effort to create a very lifelike voice interface that's, on the surface relatively clever. What's your perspective on why they've gone that direction as opposed to a more kind of brute force approach?
What did brute force
Well,
mean?
you were talking about designing the system that is that understands how it works versus the engineer saying, let's just come up with something that works. But Apple's approach seems very bespoke. Like they try very hard to have as lifelike an interaction as possible. So I was curious what your take.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the AI behind it is probably still a bludgeoning kind of a data heavy. They have the money for it, right? So they can buy gobs and gobs and gobs of data. So if you hear something that is really human-like, it means a lot of data went into it, right? And also when we talk about data science, we talk about AI, we need to realize that there is a lot of humanity behind it that's doing just raw transcription of audio, creating a baseline, right? Creating ground truth, right? So that we can train the bot. And so when you hear, for example, Amazon has hired 40,000 people, like 30,000 of those are transcribers, people who are listening to audio, and that it needs to be done that way because that's the methodology we've chosen, right? So point one is, I'd say Apple is known for its design, chops and so forth. The AI behind it is not different from the other connectionist AIs, but they do strive, and I think here they do strive to emulate the human being. Most of the time it works just fine because the interactions, especially directions, they're very well done, right? It says the next slide as opposed to wait till the last minute, right? I love that, right? So that's good design, right? That's good design that emulates human being in a very smart way. And again, I'm not holding a dogma that says never emulate a human being. I'm holding a dogma of always emulating a human being. When you can, do emulate the human being if it's a smart thing. So they have done quite a bit of design, and there's a real delta or a significant delta between them and Google, who has the same technology. They have the same order of magnitude of money and so forth. But their design, their Voicebot is not as well crafted, at least the one that's out of the box. Now, Google is famous, at least within our bubble of designers of Voicebot, people of having launched something that was very human-like, I don't know, 3 years ago. And in fact, it was so human-like that it was an outbound call of an assistant that scheduled a hairdressing appointment for their boss. So it was somebody, I don't know, I forget her name. Let's call her Nancy, right? Say, hi, this is Nancy. I want to book, an appointment for my boss. I say, okay, well, what days? And the other person who is the the hairdresser person was completely fooled by this bot. And what I'll do is, Jim, I think what I'll do is at the end of this, I'll create a page in our website in Woodlingo, and I'll have lots of links there.
Oh, great.
And I'll have a link to this video and a couple of articles I wrote about that. And I'll also send you articles about the 2 dogmas thing and so forth. Anyway.
Lindsay has a question.
Yeah, please.
I do. Thank you. Hi. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Sorry I'm not on camera. I was interested in what you were saying about it not being important to create kind of a persona or a personality for the voice. And I'm working right now not on voice interaction, but on text-to-speech capabilities. And we're looking at different voices for AI read articles, and we're playing around with the poly selections. And we're doing research right now to kind of see which one's going to work for our users. And I don't think any are in danger of being it's an actual human, but we're deciding between, should it be Joanna, should it be Matthew, should it be this newscaster? And I guess I'm wondering, do you think it matters? Some of them sound older, they obviously sound in different genders, accents, and like, what are the questions like you would be asking when we're making a decision like that?
Oh, I give always the same advice when it comes to that, is go back to UX research, which is find who is your typical user, right? Get 10, 20, 30 of them, right? Spend the time, tell them which ones do you think sounds good to you, right? Number one. Number two, do something where you can assess that without questionnaire. Like how would you find whether somebody liked the bot or not? Usually it's how long they stayed with it, right? Some kind of, I don't know, just do that voice and maybe a survey. It's going to ask you 5 questions, right? Or something like that. Basically, try to forget about how you feel about it, and go and find out how your customers, your typical user, and the hard task is, well, what is my typical user? And those are the kinds of questions that need to be asked if you want to have excellent products, is knowing our users. Who are we targeting, and what are we trying to do for them? Number one. Number two, when I say persona, shouldn't have persona, I don't mean we shouldn't put thoughts into ensuring that the bot has an integrity, meaning it can't be sometimes formal and sometimes informal in its language. It can't be verbose sometimes and succinct. It needs to be consistent, right? Consistency is one of the core principles that reduce friction, right? Every time I talk to a bot or talk to a person or something, an event happens, which is, I expected this and I got something else. Something happens in our brain and we wonder, we say, why, right? And this is a principle that applies across the board. Like, why is this not the way it usually is, or the way I expected it to be? And it creates friction, creates wondering what's going on. And then was Lisa, right? It chips away at trust. Like, this thing doesn't know what it's doing, can't even be consistent, right? So to answer you, I'm not against persona as such. I'm against folks who are trying to give a certain character because they sit in the room, they talk, and say, well, let's have her sound like somebody who is, I don't know, a plumber, who is 47 years old and he has a gruffy voice and so forth, and you come up with that. And yeah, but why? Why don't you focus on your customers, focus on your users, ensure that you're delivering integrity in terms of the personality, in terms of how it engages. Make sure your vocabulary, there's another thing, right? Make sure that your vocabulary that you're using is consistent. Sometimes I see in these Voicebot referring to an object in different ways. They talked about a case and I talk about a ticket. Did you open a case, open a ticket? Why are you using 2 different words for the same thing? Again, it creates dissonance in the user's head. And whenever you create dissonance, you create dissatisfaction. Hopefully that was useful, Lindsay.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
You bet. Okay. Yes.
So I also had a question related to text to speech. So me and my team in my graduate school, we are working on understanding how text to speech can be implemented in a more humanistic manner. And we conducted these participant interviews, and we got to know a few insights around how accents play a very important role, especially in US, where people are from such diverse backgrounds. So I just wanted your point of view, because the insights that we gathered from our interviews were, people are not really relating to the default accent that text to speech delivers. So they're looking for an accent that they can relate to in terms of the place that they come from. And secondly, also about mispronunciation. So a lot of times the machine misreads a word, but because you're not looking at the screen, you sort of do not retain the right information. So I just wanted to know your, like, what are your points? Because this is not a conversational AI. It's like a linear method of communication. So how would you error correct in this scenario?
Yeah. So the first, I would say, always, what is the use case, right? I mean, assessing a text-to-speech technology is focusing on technology. And so how would you assess it? Because it could be good for one use case, could be bad for another use case, right? So I'm always doing, I find it a bit of a tough question to answer, if there is an answer, about saying this text-to-speech is better than that text-to-speech, or this one is, because as I was saying, if it's a blind person, right, they would say your text-to-speech that everybody's raving about because it sounds so natural is bad for them. And then the text-to-speech that they like, most people would not like. So now you have the use case that will determine why. So I think what you were saying, that one of your findings is that folks find a voice bot that speaks their accent more congenial, perhaps. Yes. Okay. And so, I mean, that's an interesting finding, by the way, in general, right? If that is a proposition that you can back up scientifically, in the sense that you've done it for, for voice bots, and you've done it for this use case and that use case and that use case, and so you eliminate the variable. For example, let's say, and I don't want to be stereotypical, right? So somebody in the South, right? They have the drawl accent. Would they like the drawl accent in every single circumstance, or would they feel like, I don't want my, I don't know, medical thing. And again, I apologize, I do not mean to, right? But I'm just giving you an example of perhaps, and that's a research and empirical thing to find out is are we making assumptions? Are we smuggling assumptions here about are we overgeneralizing, right? When we make a statement such as people like something that sounds like them. Is it true in all cases? I wouldn't want to have somebody who talks like me be like a lawyer. I want somebody who sounds like, a white, an Anglo-Saxon guy who's going to go to court and know what to do things, right? Again, I'm using stereotypes just to make the point that those are things we should ask ourselves. There may be some assumptions we're packing in there. Did I address both of your points, or did I miss one?
Yeah, the second one was in terms of mispronunciation. So there are a few words. Yeah. So how do we retain?
Yeah, there is I'm forgetting the name of that. So there are words that are spelled exactly the same, but they sound different depending on what right. So I don't know, can somebody give me an example? I'm blanking. I don't know. I'll come up with an example. But there are words that are exactly the same, right? That if you stress, a syllable, it will mean one thing, versus like desert and dessert, I think would be one, right? They're spelled the same, but desert and dessert, are different, right? And Amazon's, Echo and Google Assistant, which have been around for 7 years, they still once in a while stumble on those words, and like, my gosh, right? But it's a hard problem to solve, because it's very much a matter of context, right? It's the context that will allow you to say which of these two pronunciations to choose. Now, human beings, we know when we don't know about certain things, right? Like Jim at the beginning, he wasn't sure whether he was pronouncing my last name correctly or not. So he had a sense, and he said, is this how you pronounce it? And he got it right. And sometimes people will do their best. But very rarely, I don't know if I've seen a couple of times where somebody just goes and mispronounces my name, boom, and moves on, right? Boldly. That is sort of the exception, right? But there is an interesting thing that hopefully AI will begin to incorporate, which is being aware of itself being aware of itself in these very basic ways of being aware that I don't know whether this word is being pronounced. So I will say, Mr. Bauzid, and I'm sorry, I don't know, something like that, or saying, how do you say your name, or along those lines. So my point is that people do pick up on mispronunciations. Context is important, right? I think folks are extremely forgiving when they use voice bots, when the voice bot mispronounces, but they don't expect it to be human. And that's where if you're going out of your way to sound like a human being, wow, this is great. All of a sudden you make a stupid mistake that a human being would not make by mispronouncing a word, then it backfires on you, right? So I'd say, look at the context. I think we're not there yet in terms of the bot being aware of how well it knows how to pronounce something, and then it's okay, I think, if the voice bot doesn't completely pronounces the thing, as long as it's not something crucial. And people are not going to say, this is a hang up, right? They won't do that. As long as you're delivering value. So I wouldn't sweat too much about it, to be honest with you. The bot will make mistakes, many kinds of mistakes, and those are forgivable mistakes, because sometimes human beings make them, not as often, but they do.
Do they ever, I'm reminded, like in spell checking, right? That sometimes you can tell a spell check, no, actually, really, this is spelled correctly. Just learn it.
That's right.
And I wonder, the voice bot, it gets your name wrong. It's like, no, this is how you pronounce my name. It would be great if it could just say, okay, got it, and pronounce it right the next time.
Yeah.
I can't recall ever though. I can't recall one ever doing that though.
No, they don't. We're very far from anything along those lines, right? And that's okay, I think, because I don't want that energy to be spent on solving those, because people are forgiving. But rather that we use it to solve a lot of other, more urgent problems that we have today with voice bots. Like, do the basic research, spend some of that money on the research and take it seriously, and hire product managers who take that research seriously, and so on and so forth. But yeah, those are great questions. And I didn't get your name.
I'm Zai.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great question. Are there questions in the? I see 16 chat bot.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I did throw a word parrot in there for you though.
Oh, you did? Okay. Thank you.
Dessert. The verb to dessert and then desert.
Yes.
Are all the same but mean different and pronounced different.
Right.
There you go.
Oh yeah. So it's our homophones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so there's actually I have like somewhere I have a paper with all those. And I should have brought it here, but it's an interesting phenomenon in the English language. I speak 3 languages, English and 2 others, and we don't have it in Arabic and in French. And the other interesting thing about English is it's so heavy with prepositions, right? Go up, go down, go over, go away, which drives the foreign students trying to learn the language crazy.
Yep. So we're coming up on 8 o'clock. Do we want?
Okay.
Do you want to see if there's another question or two?
Absolutely. Anybody wants to ask me, feel free. Also, I'll make sure that I have that page up. A bunch of articles that I mentioned. And I'll have my contact information there as well. So feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic. Any last questions anyone would like to ask Ahmed? These have been some great questions tonight.
Are you familiar with any kind of end of conversation surveying in terms of how satisfied people were with the conversation and how valuable or not valuable collecting that is?
Do you mean to ask whether this is commonplace or does it happen?
Well, have you found that to be a useful approach to collect that kind of end of conversation survey?
Not really, to be honest with you, because people, they just want to get in, get out, right? They're not interested in spending time. And then if you have, and what happens is you get skewed data, right? Even people, when they're happy, just want to go. And so you get a heavy negative sort of, and it sort of just creates, and usually people who are the loudest, right? And you end up solving a minor problem. Sometimes they, the loud folks will surface something, but I would not rely on it. I would rather, again, it's about, you get a pot of money. Where do you spend that money? Do you spend it in designing the posts, or do you do your research at the beginning? I am a big advocate of do as much research at the beginning, number one, but number two, even more important, because that's the gap that exists today, is that needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be pulled into the product manager, who will then from there identify the functional features. It will do X, Y, and Z. This is what it will do, right?
So when
And
you
so forth.
when you're talking research, are you talking about getting a customer one-on-one and having them try out the Voicebot and seeing what they like and don't like, and kind of delving into the reasons behind that?
As part of it, but an example of a low-hanging fruit kind of research is, let's say you're designing a voice bot for a bank, right? And the bank gets calls every single day. I don't know, 10,000 calls a day, and many of those are recorded. Listen to, I don't know, 3 days worth of these calls and what people are asking for when they call and talk to a human being. What are the things that they're asking for? What are the 80%? What's the 80% breakdown of the things that they asked about? What can you automate out of those, right? And then now you have ground truth about what's happening in real time. You're not asking anyone about their opinion. There is definitely value in surveying and when you start designing, getting people to give you, what do you think about this path and that path? Okay, that's fine. I'm talking about at the very beginning, of the cycle, finding what are the problems that people are calling about, and which among those can you automate. Don't try to automate everything, right? If they're calling, if you get a good chunk and they're calling about just activating their card, right? Yeah, I mean, that's a low-hanging fruit. I mean, they just enter their number and they're happy because they don't need to talk to anyone. And more crucially, they don't need to wait. Anyway, so that's what I mean by UX research.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
Great question.
Excellent.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you sharing your experience and expertise. Thank you everyone who joined us for terrific questions tonight. It's great to have that kind of interactive conversation. I'm glad you all could join us. We hope
buy
yeah.
the book.
Oh yeah, wait, hold it closer. It didn't.
I know. This is because I have the okay. Can you see it? It's called.
Wait. There it is. The Elements of Voice First Style.
Okay. There's a bird there. If you type my name in Amazon, it will come up.
Nice.
More important than buying it, if you buy it, is to leave a nice review if you could. Right now, it was published, I don't know, 4 weeks ago. So I'm in that phase of anxiety about getting reviews.
If you shoot me the book, I'll add it to the event.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. I will do that. I will do that.
Folks can find it.
Appreciate it.
As always, everyone, visit NoVA UX on Meetup. You can learn about upcoming events there, register on Zoom to get the meeting details. If you're interested in giving a talk, a workshop, any format, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me directly. And we're currently scheduling events all the way into the fall now, which is exciting, hopefully including 1 or 2 of those in-person social events. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you at a future event next month or after. Ahmed, thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care, guys.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.